Oregon and Indiana are both 10-0. Who would have thought it? Ohio State with a big blowout. People just don't score on them much these days. A whiteout win at Penn State. What a weekend it was around the Big Ten. Locked on Big Ten starts right now.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Big Ten. I'm Craig Shemon, 40 years as a sports talk show host and play-by-play announcer, and I want to thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you get started with 150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com and get started. So the Ducks and the Hoosiers trying to separate themselves from everybody else. We've got every Big Ten team, every Big Ten game recap of the weekend. I have analysis and opinion on all of it, plus my top 10 observations from the Big Ten this weekend. Well, let's get this party started. Talk about the Oregon Ducks, number one team in the country, 10-0, 7-0 in the Big Ten. And they had a home game at Autzen Stadium against Maryland. They won 39-18. Fairly easy if you look at the scoreboard. There's some nuance to it, though. But let's talk about Ducks quarterback Dillon Gabriel, because he broke the NCAA record for total career touchdowns in Oregon's home win over Maryland. And Gabriel threw 3 touchdown passes on the day, but his touchdown to offensive lineman, yes, his touchdown pass to offensive lineman, Janoris Wilson, of all people, was the record setter. That's kind of cool, I think. And by the way, Case Keenum was the old record holder, most career touchdowns. And then after Wilson scored, another offensive lineman, Josh Connerly Jr., had the 2-point conversion. Great job by the O-line, getting some love on the scoreboard. By the way, this record was for total touchdowns, not just passing touchdowns. Gabriel has thrown for 147 touchdowns, 32 rushing touchdowns, and he has 1 touchdown reception in his career. Of course, throughout the game, maybe he was thrown to all of his offensive linemen because he was without his number one target, and Tez Johnson, who injured his shoulder, of course, in the Michigan game the previous week. And Trayshawn Holden left the game in the first half with what appeared to be a lower leg injury, people holding their breath. He did return, though. That was great news for the Ducks, right? He only had 2 catches for 30 yards, but Evan Stewart and Terrence Ferguson had 6 catches each in the game. Game was not flawless. Dan Lanning was a little concerned that the Ducks didn't start as fast as he would have liked. That's something we mentioned in our podcast late last week. Without Tez Johnson factor, chemistry, would it take just a half a minute before they got going, before we presume they would go on to an easy win against Maryland? And that seemed to be the case for a little bit, but the bigger problem of concern was the 12 penalties for 95 yards. The Ducks should not be making those kind of mistakes that many times at this point of the season. So we'll file that away and see if that continues to be any kind of problem during the final stretch of the season. Defensively, Jordan Birch, and by the way, Ducks fans, how great is it to have him back into the lineup after being injured for a while? He had a strip sack of Billy Edwards Jr., and Brandon Johnson had a scoop and score for 62 yards in the game. Tyshim Johnson and Justin Jacobs also had interceptions for the Ducks defense. Meanwhile, the Terps, they are struggling. They have lost 5 of their last 6 games. They fell to 4-5 on the season. The other 10-0 team in the Big Ten, Indiana. Indiana held on to beat Michigan 20-14. The Hoosiers were 20-15. The Hoosiers were 14-point favorites in this game, and they did not cover. In fact, they didn't get any yards in the second half. Like literally. It was a tale of 2 halves, and the Hoosiers had to hang on. But now they're 10-0 for the first time in school history with that win over the Wolverines. Curtis Rourke, they're off to a good start. 2 touchdowns in the first half. And then Indiana's defense held Michigan to just 1 touchdown and held them to 3 field goals, 3 bend but don't break drives, if you will. And Indiana only allowed 69 rushing yards for Michigan's big running game. So there were some good things there. But Indiana absolutely stalled it out in the second half right from the get-go. Rourke, who had only thrown 3 interceptions on the year, threw an interception from his own end zone on his first offensive play of the second half, and then immediately set up Michigan with a first and goal situation from the 7. But again, good job by the Indiana defense. Michigan had to settle for a 22-yard field goal, so they didn't cash it in for a touchdown. And there was also a game management issue. Michigan fan, I'd like to hear from you on this, on the comment section. Bit of a head scratcher at the end with Sherrone Moore. Wasted about 25 seconds before calling a timeout. Indiana had stopped Michigan on downs and had taken over with 1:35 to go, but Michigan had 3 timeouts at this point. Now, Indiana got 8 yards and had a second and short, and Michigan just let about 25 seconds burn off before they finally decided to call a timeout with 57 seconds to go. Anybody out there, explain it to me. That was bizarre. That was a head scratcher for me. I know I'll hear from you Wolverine fans in the comment section on that. So Indiana holds on to win 20-15, 10-0. Couple positive notes for Michigan. Zeke Berry, I mentioned that interception that Rourke threw from the end zone. Zeke Berry was the one that got it. TJ Guy had a couple of sacks for Michigan as well. Now, setting up the table a little bit here. Indiana's got a bye week coming up this weekend, and they're going to use it to get rested and to plan and get ready for Ohio State. Both teams probably will be a top 5 Big Ten matchup, just like the Oregon-Ohio State game was. Indiana's 5 in the Associated Press right now. Again, we're not paying as much attention to that because the college football polls, but the college football poll will come out Tuesday, and so far they kind of have mocked the AP poll. Big jump because there were a lot of big losses in college football with Georgia on down Miami. They lost. Meanwhile, as Indiana gets ready now to take on the Ohio State Buckeyes, the Buckeyes are playing really, really well right now. The number 2 Buckeyes, they beat Purdue 45-0. I don't want to pat ourselves on the back because it's not that big of a deal, but we did mention on Friday's show that Purdue might not even score in this game. I mean, not even a field goal, and that turned out to be the case, 45-0. In fact, Ohio State has not allowed an offensive touchdown in 131 minutes of game time dating back to the Nebraska game. So defense is clamping it down right now. So pretty impressive by the Buckeyes. Remember, Ryan Day suggested that he was so upset giving up all those points against Oregon that they had that bye week afterward. They were going to shut it down and just scrap everything on defense and start over. He decided not to. They've been playing pretty well ever since. Good thing. Meanwhile, Will Howard threw 3 touchdown passes and ran for another in the game against Purdue. But we should note here, this is huge. Freshman sensation wide receiver Jeremiah Smith broke the Buckeyes' freshman receiving record with his 9th touchdown of the season. Chris Carter had the record since 1984, the former Minnesota Viking wide receiver. Trevion Henderson rushed for 85 yards at a touchdown and caught 3 passes for 43 yards as well. And Lathan Ransom had an interception for the Buckeyes in this game. Meanwhile, the Boilermakers, it's just not happening. They've lost 8 straight games now. This is their longest skid since 2013. And Purdue still has Penn State and Indiana left on its schedule. That's tough. That's tough. All right, just a note here. Make sure you check out our website. If you're on video, you see the scroll on the bottom, talkbig10.com. All of our podcasts go there. You can go back and check up on past podcasts on your favorite team. And we also have a link there for you if you'd like to buy some, if you're going to go buy some shirts and hats, Big Ten stuff, Purdue, Indiana, Ohio State, Michigan hats, T-shirts, sweaters. It'll go right there. There's a link for it if you want to get a jump on your Christmas shopping. Be sure to subscribe. This is free, always free. And subscribe here and follow Locked On Big Ten for free wherever you get your podcast. That way you get the latest episode of this podcast as soon as it becomes available each and every day. And again, don't forget our website, talkbig10.com. So this is new. The UCLA Bruins are on a roll. That's a new thing. We'll talk about that. And the whiteout win for Penn State, all that, plus my top 10 Big Ten observations from the weekend. It's all coming up right here on Locked On Big Ten. Get ready to tackle the rest of the NFL season, NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now New customers can get who bet $5 can get $150 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. And if you have a hunch, want to check out some stats, look at current scores, it's all right there on the same place that you put your bets in. Visit FanDuel.com and join today. And you get started with $150 of bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Monday Night Football tonight, Dolphins and Rams. I like the Rams. It's only 2.5. Rams minus 2.5. I thought it'd be a bigger spread. Also like the over at 48.5. You can do that at FanDuel.com. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I want to thank you for making Locked On Big Ten your first listen each and every day, especially you everydayers out there. Meanwhile, be sure to subscribe on YouTube and share and follow and like Locked On Big Ten, your team every day. And don't forget our website, talkbig10.com. Let's talk about the whiteout. Penn State 35-6 over Washington. I think Penn State fans needed to give that football team a boost coming off of the Ohio State loss the week before. And the one thing about the Ohio State game, and we again talked about this on our podcast last week, they didn't use Ty Warren. They're all everything tight end enough in the Ohio State game, particularly in the goal-to-go situations and the red zone situations against the Buckeyes. And I said they really needed to go back to using them again the way Andy Koldenecki had been calling plays before that. And they did. They did in the Washington game. By the way, Washington, welcome to the Big Ten, right? The whiteout, that's one of the most crazy scenes you'll ever see in college football. But anyway, Warren did get a lot of touches. He caught 8 balls for 75 yards, ran for 2 touchdowns, both out of direct snaps to him at behind center. Don't forget, he was a high school quarterback back in the day, even though he's enormous. I think he's maybe the best all-around weapon in the Big Ten. And Penn State improves now to 8-1, 5-1 in the Big Ten. And they got that whiteout crowd fired up. They scored on their first 4 possessions. And at the same time, Washington only had 71 yards in the half, 13 on the ground. So Penn State just got after it. Penn State's defense also had 5 sacks in the game. And Jalen Reed had another interception. And as far as the Huskies go, they really struggled on the road in Big Ten play. They just can't put it together. They fell to 5-5, 3-4 overall in Big Ten play. Meanwhile, Minnesota and Rutgers played. Both of these teams came into this game with huge streaks, and one of them was going to end. Minnesota had won 4 straight. Rutgers had lost 4 straight after winning 4 straight. Well, Rutgers, they get the win here, 26-19. Quarterback Ethan Kaliakmanis, who transferred from Minnesota to Rutgers, playing against his former teammates, his former team, and his former coach, and PJ Fleck, threw for 240 yards and 3 touchdowns and an interception. 2 of those touchdown passes were caught by Demir Miller. For the Gophers, Max Brosmer threw 45 times in this game. Now he completed 27 for 262 yards and just 1 touchdown pass. Rutgers held Minnesota running back Darius Taylor to a mere 28 yards on 10 carries. That's hard to do. They did it. And I'm sure that wasn't part of PJ Fleck's plan to have Darius Taylor only run for 28 yards and only get 10 touches out of the backfield. Rutgers defense, on the other hand, which had struggled during their skid, got a safety by sacking Max Brosmer in the end zone in the second half. Jordan Walker, by the way, got that sack. Bright spot for Minnesota. Ethan Robinson had an interception for the Gophers. They got 16 picks on the season. And let's not forget, I know here we are on Monday. The weekend started on Friday. Iowa went out to the Rose Bowl to take on UCLA. UCLA's won 3 straight games. And the key to this game was the running back on both sides. And keep in mind that Deshaun Foster, former NFL and former UCLA running back, now the head coach. So he made this his focal point of this game. First of all, his own running back, TJ Harden, had his first 100-yard game of this season. I believe it's his 4th of his career. And did it on 20 carries and 125 yards. Ethan Garbers threw 2 touchdown passes in the Bruins' 20-17 win over the Hawkeyes. See, the Hawkeyes didn't score 40. which they do all the time. That's one of the reasons they didn't win. A lot of turnovers in this game on both sides. Even more importantly, though, talk about running backs. Good job to UCLA and their defensive plan. They held Caleb Johnson to a season low 49 yards on the ground. And adding to that defensive effort, Carson Swessinger had 2 interceptions on the day for the Bruins. There were a couple of bright spots from the Hawkeyes. They threw for 185 yards, which is about 85 yards more than they normally do. That's a high number for them. And I'm going to point out, Jacob Gill had 6 catches for 138 yards. Look, we talk about Iowa football all the time. Quarterbacks don't throw for a lot of yardage. It's a lot of tight end this and running backs that. Wide receivers don't get much attention at Iowa. So when a guy gets 6 catches for 138 yards at Iowa, we're going to mention it. Probably going to mention it again in my top 10 observations coming up in a minute. Quinn Schulte and also Zach Lutmer had interceptions for the Hawkeyes in that game. I want to make a mention now of this past weekend's AP, Associated Press, top 25 poll. I told you we're going to stop paying so much attention to it because now we have the college football committee poll that comes out every Tuesday, and that's the one that actually decides who gets into the college football playoffs. Now, the first one came out last week, and maybe with one exception, where Ohio State was 2 and Georgia was 3 instead of the other way around, their top 12 picks were identical. So I think it's worth mentioning, maybe a precursor. We had Georgia lose. We had Miami lose. How will that affect some other teams? Right now, I don't ever recall this before. The AP top 25, 4 of the top 5 teams are Big Ten teams. We got Oregon at number 1, unanimous again. Second week in a row, they'd be unanimous. Ohio State at 2 after their blowout win over Purdue. Texas is in there at number 3 from the SEC. And then Penn State is at 4, and Indiana moves up from 8 to number 5. I'm starting to think that the higher that Indiana gets, and again, they're on a bye week next week, okay? The higher they get like this, could they afford to lose a close game to Ohio State the following game and still remain in the playoff mix? That's the question. That's the question. If you have an answer, hit me up with the comments. But we'll find out. It'll all play out over time. I wanted to mention the top 5, 4 of them Big Ten teams in the AP top 25. All right, coming up, I have my top 10 observations from the Big Ten. I will share them with you. We'll see if they match up with your observations and memories of this weekend. It's all coming up in 1 minute right here on Locked On Big Ten. Game Time is how you buy tickets to go to games. You want to go to a Big Ten football game? You want to go to a Big Ten basketball game, NBA, or non-sports? Use Game Time, sports or non-sports. You want tickets? If an event has a ticket, use your Game Time app on your device or your phone. Concerts and comedy shows, same thing. Check it out. They've got great pricing. By the way, no surprise pricing. It's all right there. What you see is what you owe. And in fact, they have the lowest price guarantee at Game Time, where they will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a different price. They also have a picture view, panoramic view of the seat of the ticket you're about to buy. You can check that out on your phone before you buy, and just a couple of taps and you're done. But you got to download the Game Time app, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing agents industry as well. So take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, I want to put on screen here, one at a time, my top 10 Big Ten observations from the weekend from all the football that's going on. If you're new here, we're getting like 500-600 new subscribers every month. Thank you. Please hit that subscribe button. Tells me a lot of new people. At the end of each podcast, we always have a segment benchmark segment. Mondays, we do our top 10 Big Ten observations for the weekend. Tuesday, we do Tuesday tweets. Send out a tweet right now at Talk Big Ten. If I find it, I'll put it on for Tuesday's show. Wednesday, we do our power rankings. Thursday, we take a look at the Big Ten Network schedule of live action and Big Ten Classics. And Friday, we do our pigskin picks. So let's do it without any further delay. Let us get our top 10 Big Ten observations from the weekend on the board. Right now, while I'm thinking about it, I have 11. I had an honorable mention. I want that safety in the Rutgers game. I wanted to put that in there. I was like little defensive things I like to put in there like that. And number 10, though, as I told you a minute ago, we are going to go ahead and put Iowa wide receiver Jacob Gill on here for his 6-catch, 138-yard performance against UCLA. Again, Iowa really doesn't use its wide receivers a lot. So that was a big outing for him. Let's see what else we got here on the board. Speaking of UCLA, Carson Schlesinger, 2 interceptions against Iowa in that. So, and then also add on kind of the same category, the UCLA defense that held Caleb Johnson, they're all great running back for Iowa, to just 49 yards, season low. This guy's capable of 200 yards at any given time. Look, UCLA decided, look, Iowa's not going to beat you with the pass. Let's just gang up on Caleb Johnson. Most people have that philosophy going into the game, and yet Johnson still busts off 135 yards, 150 yards, whatever, and Iowa ends up winning big. Not the case here. It's a good job by UCLA game planning and executing with this. And number 8, Rutgers, I mentioned their safety on the defense that they got. How about Demir Miller? 2 touchdown receptions versus Minnesota. And I'll give a shout out to Ethan Kaliak-Manis, who had 3 touchdown passes against his former team. I'm sure he really wanted to do that. That had a little extra meaning for him. At number 7, I'm going to mention the Penn State defense. They had 5 sacks. Jalen Reed had an interception against Washington. The whiteout crowd loved it there at Happy Valley. Speaking of Penn State, at number 6, we got to go with Ty Warren. Their tight end, again, 8 catches, 75 yards, and running in for a couple of touchdowns as well in that. By the way, these top 10 are just 10. They're not in any real particular order, kind of a loose order, if you will. At number 5, I'm going to talk up the Indiana defense, holding Michigan to just 1 touchdown and 3 field goals on a lot of goal. You know, Michigan got in there a time or two, and they had to settle for a field goal. In fact, one time a 22-yard field goal. You don't want a field goal that short. That means you didn't get in the end zone. Indiana defense did it, and the Hoosiers, despite no offensive production in the second half, the defense held them in this game, protected their lead, and Indiana is 10-0 for the first time in school history. And number 4, I'm going to mention the Ohio State defense. No offensive touchdowns in 131 minutes. That's this Purdue game. That's going back. That's going back to the Nebraska game, a part of that. So they're really playing well. I believe they have Northwestern coming up next before they take on the Indiana Hoosiers. That game will be at Wrigley Field, by the way, the Ohio State Northwestern game. As long as we're talking about Ohio State, Jeremiah Smith, I mentioned, breaking the freshman receiving record with his 9th touchdown of the season. Chris Carter did it back in 1984 before he went on to the NFL. I think he went to the USFL before he went to the NFL. Was it the Philadelphia Stars? Somebody will remind me of it. That's, I think so. At number 2, I want to give a shout out to the Oregon Duck offensive line. Not so much for protecting Dylan Gabriel, but I mean, scoring points. Gabriel throwing a touchdown to Janoris Wilson, and then Josh Connerly with the 2-point conversion. Yeah. Oh, and I have to mention, I probably should have made this another category. Brandon Johnson's 62-yard scoop and score was another awesome thing that happened over the weekend. So I want to mention that as well. And then we'll just put Dylan Gabriel at the top, a leading Heisman candidate for the Big Ten, number 1 team in the country, and now broke the NCAA record for total career touchdowns in that win versus Maryland on Saturday. So what do you think? Those are my top 10 Big Ten observations from the weekend. Does that match up with yours? Anyway, let me know what you think. Pretty cool. We do this every Monday, so you can be part of that as well. All right. Coming up, we are going to have a few notes left from the weekend I want to get to. We got basketball in full swing, but we're wall-to-wall football, another big week of football. We're starting looking ahead to this weekend as well with what comes out. We'll talk about the TV times and who's going to what network and the players of the week. We'll have it all right here. We are your source for all things Big Ten right here. News, stories, opinion, analysis, all under one roof. Tell your friends about us. I know if you're watching this with any regularity that you also have a Big Ten friend or family member. Spread the word, share it, or tell them about it, that we're here each and every day. We'd really appreciate it. Word of mouth really helps us out with stuff like that. In the meantime, don't forget to check out our website, talkbig10.com, for all of our past podcasts. I invite you to go for a second listen and check out another one. And while you're there are links provided if you want to go buy some merchandise from your favorite school in the Big Ten right there. Do some Christmas shopping ahead of time. All that is coming up. You hit me up on Twitter at TalkBig10 and, of course, on YouTube. Always appreciate the comments and the back and forth between you all on the YouTube comments if you want to jump in with all of that. And before you go, subscribe. It's free. Subscribe and follow and share this podcast right now wherever you get your podcast at, and you'll get the latest episode of Locked On Big Ten as soon as it becomes available each and every day. I can't wait to talk to you tomorrow. November football is the best. We're winding down. Got all these great scenarios. We'll see you then. For Locked On Big Ten, I'm Craig Shemon.